Madam Clerk, it looks like we're live. Is that?
Now we're good to go. And I do see that Councillor Soever is just joining us now. So you do have all members here, Mr. Chair, and the meeting is yours.
Great. Well, thank you, Madam Clerk, and welcome to our Affordable Housing Task Force meeting for April 27th, 2022. Our agenda was published on our website, and so we do have an agenda here for us to conduct our meeting today. From that, is there any declaration of interest with the members of our task force today with regards to the items? Okay, if none, if one does arise, you can declare it at that time. So we have a few reports here. So our first report is with regards to HDR AF 0222 14th Street Supportive Housing Project draft design, and we do have a motion there. So to put it on the floor, would somebody care to move that motion? Moved by Mr. Burley, second by Mr. O'Leary. All right, and I'm going to pass this report over to you, Anne Marie, and good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everybody. We just wanted to give you an update on where we're at with our 14th Street West project. We, at the last meeting, had announced that we had hired Allen Avis Architects. They were awarded the architectural contract, and we're looking at providing us with our first schematic design. So this report is just about the supportive housing units and the schematic, the draft schematic design that we have. I'm going to try to share my screen, see if I can put up a picture of it. Can everyone see that?
Looks good.
Perfect. So this is where we're at so far. They have provided us with, they met with staff, they were at the building. We had their engineering and their mechanical engineering personnel met with Aaron and I. We gave them an idea of what we were looking for, and they came up with this schematic design. We just wanted to introduce it today and have chance for everybody to comment on it. I'll give you a little bit, just explain a little bit about it. There are 12 supportive housing units. Those are the units that are in blue. They are all individual units. They're studio apartments. All studio apartments will have a kitchenette that will have a built-in stovetop, a fridge, and a microwave. We're looking at 2 barrier-free units, and then the remaining would be using barrier-free design, so including grab bars in the bathrooms, the heightened toilets, showers, wider doorways, and all of them, because they're studio apartments, would have that open concept. We are looking at, we will be providing the furniture, but the bed would be continuing with the person. If the person goes to a new place, then they would look at taking that with them. The materials in the units would be low in maintenance and durable. We would be supplying internet, and each unit will have its own ability to change heat and cold. The floor plan itself, looking at the offices in the middle, we wanted to obviously put the studio apartments around where we can have the windows. The areas that are in green are staff rooms or offices. You'll note in the middle, there are some smaller offices that will have sinks, so that if there is primary care, then there would be the ability for primary care to come in and provide services. There would be ongoing staff, and then there would be also offices available for community partners. We're looking at the green or the pinky purple areas, the common room area that would be for the tenants to use. And the hub area, the programming area, would be multi-purpose use. It would be for services that are coming in to provide different programming. It could be open to public programming. It would have its own separate entrance away from the units, and also would be locked off. The only change that we are looking at this, if you notice just above the hubs and program room, we have a utility, garage, and storage. We're going to change those around so that the garbage and utility room can have its separate entrance outside. So those are 2 things. Aaron is actually going to provide more of a idea about the mechanical and electrical parts of it, but I noticed that there's a question if you'd like me to answer that now or at the end. I'm not sure, Chair McQueen.
We can take it now. Go ahead, Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you. Anne-Marie, where's 14th Street on this plan?
So 14th Street, if you're looking at it, it would be where on the left side, if you're looking at it.
The left side. Okay, that's all. I just, I was looking to see if it was marked there somewhere, but I just wanted to see how I would look at it from the front. Yeah. So 14th Street is on the left, and that would be the front of the
building. So that where you would come in, where you would enter in right now, that is the same area. So that is that area at the lower part where the meeting room is. So it's the same entrance there.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Carry on then, Anne-Marie.
Okay, so I'm just going to turn it over to Aaron Whitney then to talk about some of the more mechanical aspects of the drawing.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. We've recently got some drawings, preliminary design back from our mechanical electrical engineers. So for this building, we are looking at using a heat pump system to provide heating and cooling to all the units. So all the units in blue, basically, there's one heat pump that would be able to provide heating and cooling to 3 units. The hub areas, offices, corridors, there's 2 existing rooftop units that we're looking at refurbishing. And basically they're going to provide heating for all those areas. All the bathroom fixtures, plumbing fixtures, as Anne-Marie noted, will be barrier-free design, and there will be units that will be fully accessible. Basically, all the washrooms do have the turning requirements in them. So we're working with the mechanical electricals just as providing those cut sheets. The hub area is going to have a kitchen in it for any programs or anything. So we're working with them on the design of it. All Energy Star windows, doors will be put in. Laundry services will actually be put in each unit with a small stackable washer and dryer. And we are planning on putting a new roof on the entire building as well, as there is some existing leaks. Any questions regarding the mechanical plumbing?
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Aaron. Are there any questions? I can't quite see everybody's. I see a few, but I don't have everybody's picture on here.
Councillor Burley.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Burley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nice to see you again, Aaron. Just curious, it's a fantastic looking design so far. I know it's very preliminary, you're just starting. In each one of the units, will each unit be independently controlled with remote shutoffs? I'm thinking about sinks and all that wonderful stuff. In other words, it's all isolated?
Yeah, so each unit will have it shut off for plumbing, like shutoffs in the hallway that will be able to shut the units off. Yes, that will be designed. For the heat pumps, every unit will have control of their own heat within 5 degrees, basically, because that's the limits of heat pumps. You can only have it plus or 5 minus on one system. So somebody could have it at 70 and 75. So answer yes, they'll have their own controls.
What I was coming at is the actual control shut off in the unit itself or in the hall?
They're usually in the hallway. We put a main shut off in the hallway, and then there also will be shut offs at the sinks and everything like that.
Okay, and may I ask another question, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
I just wondering, Aaron or Anne-Marie, I realize you don't have a site drawing here. This is just a very preliminary sharp drawing, but the river's on the top side, I take it. And I assume that as the design goes, that you incorporate sidewalks and stuff and so on to be able to use that the whole perimeter of the property. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, we recently just received a site drawing actually yesterday for preliminary design and to apply for site plan approval from the city. So there is a sidewalk if you're looking at this sheet on the left-hand side and at the back. And there also will be a sidewalk going down to the other street at the bottom of the page.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that. I think Councillor Keaveney, you have some questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Great design, and I just had one question for you, Aaron. I'm curious to know if a sprinkler system is required.
A sprinkler system is not required with this building. That was one of the first questions we had with our architect and review it. So with the building construction, one is not required.
You have a follow-up to that, Shirley, or?
So we would probably be looking at heat detectors though in the units like we have with our own, so that if an alarm doesn't go off or for whatever reason, there's still that heat detector that is directly linked to the fire department. So we would continue with that same service in here too. So.
Shirley, you still have your hand up. You still have another question? Thanks, Emery.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I did think of another question. I wondered as well about fireproof doors and self-closing doors and fireproofing between units and so on. You're nodding your head, so that is all part of the design?
Yes, so between the units, I believe it's an hour and a half fire rating. So each of the units will be fire rated between the units. There are fire ratings required around the mechanical rooms. The building will have a fully alarm system, like in most of our residential units that we have. And again, Emery, there'll be smoke detectors, heat detectors required in all those rooms.
Okay. Anything else, Shirley? No. Aaron, did you ever cost out the sprinkling system? What that would have cost?
For a sprinkler system?
Yeah.
We didn't get a costing on it just because that's one of the first things as an architect has to do. They have to figure out whether a sprinkler is required or isn't. And because this is a residential building and not a care and detention occupancy, one is not required as per the building code.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from committee members? Oh, go ahead, Councillor Swerver.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. So in terms of the sprinkler system, in terms of insurance, would there be savings on the insurance if there was a sprinkler system?
There could possibly. I know with the buildings that we have that we insure right now, it's more heat detectors, smoke detectors, and the oven having it's a certain type of burner that doesn't allow fires, which we are putting in these buildings too. So those are the three items they ask us right now. And I think because we're not considered a care facility, that it's not a requirement, that maybe it doesn't make as much difference. Certainly something we could look into, Councillor Soever, though.
Yeah, I was just thinking if there was a saving on the insurance, what the payback would be on the installation of a sprinkler system.
Well, and probably also the early detection or the savings of the building along with lives, probably with sprinkler systems too, to a certain degree, right?
That's correct, but heat detectors also provide that early warning for us too, so.
Okay. Thank you for that information. I have Shirley, or go ahead, Councillor Keaveney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Curious to know, was this a smoke-free building? Is smoking permitted within the building?
It will be a smoke-free building. All the buildings that we have in our portfolio are grandfathered in smoke-free as of, I believe it was 2013. So it will be along with the lines with that. We did meet with a peer advisory group out of the Canadian Mental Health Association to get some advice on what they might see and look for in a building. We have some preliminary feedback from them, and we're expecting some more. And one of them was just to allow a designated smoking area outside so that there is an area for people to go. The other one was around pets, and we will be pet friendly. All of our buildings are pet friendly, so that was another aspect. Definitely some of the sinks in some of the rooms, laundry. There was a number of great suggestions that they did have for us, and that group is going to wrap up a little bit more of a formal report and send that back to us. More looking not necessarily with the design, but more on amenities and some of the things that we could programming and what we could bring into the into the project. So we're looking forward to those comments from them too.
Okay. Any other comments? I guess a question I have for Aaron is, with the heat pump, not only does that provide, I guess, more efficient type of heat, but that also provides air conditioning too, correct?
That's correct. A head basically is mounted in each unit, and they'll have the air-to-air heat pump allows for heating and cooling.
Right. So that's a added for comfort, for year-round comfort, which is nice. I know my parents are way into their 80s. They like it cranked at about 82 degrees. So probably the same in the cooling as well, right? To keep it cool. Okay. Oh, Mr. Warden, good afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The units are designed for supportive housing, which presumably is for individuals who are single. But would they ever be allowed to have a partner stay with them? Would the rules allow with respect to that?
I would imagine if there was a couple that was interested in moving into supportive housing, that's something that we would certainly support. Programming rules and all of that, we're working with the Canadian Mental Health Association around what the program model will look like, and that's sort of still in conversation. But something that we have met about and are continuing to meet.
And I'm gathering that the common areas, could those be used for visitation? So for example, if they have, access to their children, or they have family that want to visit, is that what those spaces are for?
Certainly. I mean, the common room area will have, couch TV. So there'll be like another place for someone to go and meet, or if they're, but also if they wanted to bring family in, there's the meeting room, all the rooms in pink could certainly be reserved for people to have meetings with. The other thing that we're putting into the hub programming space is the ability to host meals there. So if there was group meals or there'll be that access there too.
Socials. Right. Card games and all that kind of stuff. Birthday parties and stuff. Go ahead, Councilor Burley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering, Anne-Marie or Aaron, I assume this will be a controlled building as like the rest of our buildings with the access, and I imagine the main access will be through the front door to each one of these units. And is it necessary with this design for this purpose to have barricades or whatever outside the buildings for separation between the two?
So we will be installing a fob system on the building that the tenants will have a fob system to enter through the vestibule, through the reception. The idea is also that we'll have a fobbed entry into the corridor, meeting room, and hub programs room. That way, after hours, that room could be used as a meeting room or social events or whatever. People could rent that out, but it would be separate from the rest of the building. So it would be able to be programmed for that. What was the question about the barricades outside?
I'm just thinking about I'll refer to them as a partition between each unit on the outside egress. Is there any patios outside them or just sidewalks?
We weren't having any patio doors, or in the preliminary design, there isn't any patio doors or patios outside the units right now. Basically, the drawing just shows windows looking out the units.
Okay, thank you.
Just going on that, Aaron, is there going to be a common area that people could sit outside? No, fresh air and outside is something that's good for health. Is there like a common area?
That's what we're looking at with the site plan, is at the top of the page, kind of facing the river, is to put a pad, maybe a pergola up out there where tenants could gather. And I mean, it is a nice view out the back. There is some gray stubble, maybe restrictions out the back, but we're working with the architect on that.
Good. Because outdoor fresh air is good for everyone as well, right? So, yep. Mr. Warden, you got a question?
Sorry, I should have asked this earlier, but it just made me think of it as the discussion was going on. I'm gathering that there will be security built in. So in other words, there'll be cameras externally as well as internally.
Aaron?
So what type of security? I'm sorry, are you person security?
Yes, I'm thinking
Yes.
Just cameras.
Oh, yes. Certainly, there'll be cameras inside and outside, and depending on the model of care that we're looking at, we're hoping to be able to provide 24-hour care, so that there would be staffing on site for 24/7 too. So that that's what we're aiming for, and working again with Canadian Mental Health Association, and some applications to the Ontario Health Team for some of those funds.
Any other questions from committee members? So it was raised about the idea of getting a price on or from insurance. Is that something that this committee wishes to pursue, or maybe Madam CEO, if you have any comments there with regards to our insurance? I don't know if you have any comments there or not, but.
Here. We're actually in the midst of, it's interesting that this has come up today, because we're actually in the midst of some further discussions with Marsh, our insurance provider, around risk ratings and risk remediation. So it's easily and a perfect time to be weaving that into these conversations. So that we'll follow up that way, since we're going to be talking to them anyway.
Anything to save anything on insurance, because it's gone through the roof, literally. So.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. I don't see everybody. Is there any last comments, questions from anyone on this?
Certainly, just that we wanted to provide this opportunity to have a look at what we have proposed so far. And timeline-wise, we are just waiting for, I believe, one more drawing from our architect, and then we'll be submitting our site plan approval with the City of Owen Sound, which we've already been working with them on. And then we're hoping that we would be out for tender sometime in May for construction, with construction drawings. So maybe at the end of May, beginning of June is sort of our hopeful. And then the architect is convinced and is thinking that it would be definitely a March of 2023 completion for the renovation. So, and that will meet our provincial guidelines too.
So in this environment of building, have you been talking to a few perspectives, just to give them a heads up, as if you have a pretty aggressive time frame there? So.
Yes, and we've been fortunate that Alan Avis, the architect, Alan Avis Architects are familiar with some of our deadlines that we have. They've worked with municipalities and counties that have been working with tight timelines from provincial funding. So we're lucky that they've gone through this again before and recently too. So yeah.
We'll look forward to that moving forward. Any last comments from committee or staff? Can you just take your screen down, Anne-Marie, so I can see everybody, and then I'm going to call the vote here then. If there's no other questions, then all in favor of the motion. Okay, that's carried unanimously. Okay, so moving on our agenda then to, this is a big one, Randy, with regards to the motion, with regards to comments from yourself and the county with regards to Bill 109, More Homes for Everyone Act. And there is a motion there. Would somebody care to put it on the floor? The Warden Hicks and Councillor Keaveney. All right. So Randy, you did your homework on this one, and I know through AMO, I've seen some of this before, because that came through our MOU and lots of discussion and sort of getting it done before the election is called. So there's a lot of tight turnarounds here, but I'll pass it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Chair McQueen, and good afternoon, everyone. This topic is a big topic, but it's not as exciting as the supportive housing report and topic for sure. I get the legislation topic to go through, but anyways, as you know, earlier this year, the Provincial Affordable Housing Task Force released their report, and they made a number of recommendations for the province to consider. And as an initial response to some of those recommendations, the province released some proposed initial legislation changes through, as you noted, Bill 109, which is called the More Homes for Everyone Act. Those legislation changes were released end of March, and the province was initially seeking comments by April 29th. However, Bill 109 received royal assent on April 14th of this month. And that bill has made several amendments to the Planning Act, as well as several other pieces of legislation. So although Bill 109 is already passed, the province also is consulting on several associated topics, including recommendations on how to deliver gentle density and support multi-gen communities, how best to support not-for-profit housing providers, as well as addressing housing needs in rural and northern communities. So this report provides a summary of the Bill 109 changes and some recommended comments, and it also provides some comments on those associated consultations. So I'll just highlight some of the key legislation changes made by Bill 109, and I'll just highlight some of the staff comments and thoughts, and I'll also go through some of the questions posed by the province regarding those associated consultations. So in terms of the changes to the Planning Act, the province has made several changes, including changes to site plan application approvals, zoning approvals, plan of subdivisions, as well as the creation of a new tool called the Community Infrastructure and Housing Accelerator tool. With respect to the site plan approval changes, the first change is requiring municipalities to appoint an officer, employee, or agent of the municipality to make decisions on site plan applications made on or after July 1st, 2022. Another change for site plan is extending site plan application review from 30 days to 60 days. Establishing a regulation-making authority to prescribe complete application requirements with recourse if a site plan application has not been deemed complete within 30 days of acceptance by a municipality. And then the fourth change, which I think is probably one of the more controversial changes that we've heard and seen comments on from other municipalities, is requiring municipalities to partially refund site plan application fees to applicants who do not receive a decision within a certain time frame, and the funds are to be refunded, or the fees are to be refunded on a graduated basis thereafter for applications. And these are applications that are made after January 1st, 2023. And you can see in the report that's what the changes put in place in terms of refunding fees by. So for example, 50% of the total application fee has to be refunded if a decision is not made within 60 days of the deeming an application complete. This next step is 75% of the total application fee if a decision is not made within 90 days, and then the entire application fee if a decision is not made within 120 days. In terms of some of the county staff comments on the proposed changes to the site plan, with respect to requiring decisions of site plan applications to be made at the staff level, county staffs generally see this change as a positive change. This change aligns with the suggested planning process improvements that were highlighted in a previous county staff report that was presented to County Council earlier this year. And some of those changes were to look at ways to help streamline the overall development process. Site plan approval is essentially a technical exercise that ensures that the official plan policies and zoning bylaw provisions that have been established by council are adhered to. And municipalities are typically limited in terms of what they can request as part of a site plan application. And appeals are also limited to typically the applicant only. Therefore, it's important to ensure that official plan policies and zoning bylaws are updated on a regular basis to reflect the community's vision on how a municipality would like to see their communities develop out, because that's essentially the site plan application is ensuring that those policies and zoning provisions are being adhered to. In terms of the comments about the extending site plan approval, staff, we support that. That just provides further time for municipalities to review and approve a site plan application. With respect to regulating complete application requirements, we haven't seen yet what the province is proposing with respect to that. So therefore, it's difficult to comment at this time. However, we're hoping that the complete application requirements will be as flexible as possible. Otherwise, if they're quite restrictive, we might see municipalities looking to, for example, apply holding zones on specific properties if they feel that additional information would be required that they're not able to require at time of site plan application. So there may have to be some further adjustments need to be looked at depending on what is prescribed as complete application requirements by the province. And generally what we're recommending is that municipalities or the province not provide those prescribed application requirements and leave that up to municipalities to decide what is required at time of complete application. With respect to the changes requiring municipalities to refund the application fees if a decision is not made within timeframes, as I noted, this one's probably the more controversial one that we've seen comments on from municipalities. And county staff are equally concerned that these changes, we feel, are unfairly penalize municipalities for not approving applications. The planning approval process involves a number of stakeholders, and the municipality relies on comments from all those stakeholders in order to render a decision. So if those comments from stakeholders are not received in a timely fashion, or if several revisions are required to a site plan application, that causes delays in approving a site plan application. And in most cases, that's beyond the control of a municipality. Therefore, in staff's opinion, it's unfair to penalize a municipality on application revenue, especially when a municipality relies on that application revenue in order to fund the costs associated with administering and reviewing site plan applications. What it could cause is that municipalities may have to look for other funding sources, including the tax levy, in order to offset some of those revenue losses if they had to refund those fees. And therefore, that means that existing taxpayers would be responsible for funding expenses associated with development applications. There also could be other approvals that are required from agencies and provincial ministries, which may also be required. That could also lead to potential delays in getting, in terms of processing these site plan applications and getting more homes built. So another thing is that municipalities may also need to increase staff resources in order to review and process applications to avoid those potential penalties. And in some cases, in speaking with some municipalities, we're already finding it challenging in some cases to fill existing staff vacancies, let alone trying to add potentially more staff in order to review and process these applications. Municipalities may also need to explore options for being more stringent on not deeming an application complete unless a full comprehensive application package has been submitted. And we're hopeful that by having flexibility in terms of deeming an application complete, that municipalities may require applicants to pre-consult with agencies and other stakeholders prior to actually submitting the application. And this would help to, again, speed up and expedite the actual approvals, because if those consultations have already occurred with, say, for example, conservation authorities or MTO, then they already have some of those comments and feedback from those individuals. For site applications adjacent to a county road, the Act does require that municipalities provide the county a reasonable opportunity to require the owner of the land to provide things like road widenings, turning lanes, parking lanes, etc. And county staff will endeavor to work with municipalities within the prescribed timeframes, but we just wanted to highlight that as another, potential barrier that in terms of processing and trying to meet those prescribed timeframes that the province has set for before penalties are incurred. We also feel that these changes may result in the opposite effect the province is trying to achieve, in that if a municipality does not have all the information required to make a decision, they may choose to refuse the application prior to the penalty timelines kicking in. This would cause the applicant to either appeal that decision, that refusal, to the OLT, which, as we know, could delay then the proposed development by several months to a year. Or it could force the applicant to reapply and to start the process over again. So the preferred alternative is to allow municipalities the flexibility to work with the applicant and other stakeholders, which is the process that it was pre-Bill 109, which is what is typically an iterative process that usually results in a positive outcome for all versus wasting what we feel additional time and resources through either a lengthy OLT process or by causing the applicant to restart and reapply. So we feel that that's probably the preferred alternative rather than what is being put in place by Bill 109. And therefore, county staff recommend that the province pass further legislation to remove those application fee penalties because we feel that these penalties could even have the opposite effect that the province is trying to achieve. In terms of zoning changes, so they're very similar to the site plan application changes in that if a municipality doesn't make a decision within a certain time frame, then application fees would need to be refunded. These new provisions would apply to zoning applications submitted after January 1st, 2023. In terms of plan of subdivision changes, there's two main changes that were made. One is establishing regulation making authority to prescribe what can or cannot be required as a condition of subdivision approval. And the second change is establishing a one-time authority to reinstate draft plans that have lapsed within the past 5 years, as long as units have not been pre-sold to prevent redundancies. In terms of the county staff comments, for the first one, with respect to regulating what can or cannot be required as a condition of draft approval, we noted in the staff comments that each development is unique, and therefore a generic one-size-fits-all approach for conditions of draft approval doesn't work. Therefore, we're concerned that if the province prescribes specific details on what can or cannot be required as a condition of subdivision approval, then that may limit our ability and flexibility to develop conditions that are unique to any given development proposal. This may require the municipality to require generic conditions that lack those details, and requiring instead details to be provided as part of a subdivision agreement process. And in speaking with developers, they indicated that certainty and knowing what is required up front is key for them. So by not providing that certainty and clarity as part of the draft plan conditions, then that leaves a lot of uncertainty as part of the final approval process, and which we think is not the outcome that both developers as well as municipalities actually want to achieve. Therefore, we're recommending the province not prescribe specific details on what can or cannot be included in draft plan conditions, and just leave that, again, up to municipalities to determine what is the appropriate conditions for each specific development, because each development, like I said, is unique. With respect to establishing a one-time discretionary authority to reinstate draft plans that have lapsed within the past 5 years, we generally support this change. This has come up in the past. There's been the odd time where a draft plan has lapsed, and prior to Bill 109, once a subdivision had lapsed, it causes the applicant to reapply, and we have to go through the full process again, including having another public meeting. So these changes made in Bill 109 will save both the applicants and municipalities time and resources. The last change, just to highlight in the Bill 109 changes on the Planning Act, is this new tool that the province has introduced called the Community Infrastructure and Housing Accelerator tool. So this is a new tool. The purpose of the tool is to allow the minister to expedite zoning changes for certain types of development if requested by a municipality. It's very similar to a minister's zoning order and can only be utilized for certain types of development outside of the Greenbelt area. So for our area, that's outside of the Niagara Escarpment Plain area. The minister has to establish guidelines, and the province did post some guidelines on the ERO as part of that. And we tried to summarize those draft guidelines in the report. The types of development that can use this tool include things like community infrastructure that is subject to a Planning Act approval, that support the quality of life for people and communities by providing public services for matters such as health, long-term care, education, recreation, sociocultural activities, and security and safety. Other developments include any type of housing, including community housing, affordable housing, and market-based housing. Buildings that would facilitate employment and economic development, as well as mixed-use developments. So these, in terms of county staff comments for this new tool, these are very similar to MZOs, as I mentioned. And from a staff's perspective, there is a time and place for a tool of this nature to be used, such as a proposed development that would have significant overall benefit for the community, but just doesn't quite meet the current zoning provisions. This could include, for example, a new public hospital, a new long-term care facility, a municipally owned or not-for-profit affordable housing build. The supportive housing that we just described would be a good example of when a tool of this nature might make sense. The development should still adhere to natural hazard or heritage policies, and should require stakeholder consultation, which it appears that the proposed guidelines for this new tool would support. Staff would recommend, however, that this tool be utilized sparingly. We would instead recommend that flexibility be provided in our zoning documents to allow these types of developments to occur in a variety of zones, to ensure that we're, again, just allowing that flexibility to occur where developments are going to have, significant community benefit. We think that our official plan documents or zoning documents should allow those types of developments to occur in a variety of areas in our communities. There were other changes in Bill 109, including some Building Code Act changes, which we've highlighted in the report. They're also proposing some changes in terms of improving data collection. There's things around surety bonds, and as well as OLT improvements and providing funding to hopefully expedite the approvals that are sitting with the OLT. So there are some other changes that we have highlighted, but I won't go through those in detail. Maybe I'll take a pause there and see if there's any questions with respect to the changes to the legislation before I go into some of the comments on the other housing consultations.
Yeah, there's a number of questions there. So yes, thanks, Randy. And at this point, are there questions, comments with regards to the changes that Randy's bringing forward to us with Bill 109? Go ahead, Councillor Lurie.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. Randy, I'm just wondering about this application fee penalty. You would prefer the two sides just to work together, which is really what they're doing now. So what is the thinking behind doing this? Like it's just going to cause hard feelings. It's going to cause confusion. Like, what is the reason for it? What are they trying to fix?
Yeah, it's a good question, and we have had the advantage of taking. There was a webinar that the province held last week, and some staff sat on that, including myself. And my understanding is what their thoughts were. Right now, we don't under the Act. There's not a deeming a complete application or for a site plan is not a thing. So Bill 109 introduces deeming a site plan application complete. And as part of their thinking, I think they're wanting to make sure that complete and comprehensive applications are submitted, because what we do find is that in some cases that the applications that municipalities receive, it doesn't have all the information that's required. And there's a lot of back and forth then that's caused by that. And when you have a lot of back and forth and a lot of stakeholders, then there's a lot of back and forth amongst a number of stakeholders and the applicant to eventually get to a stage where you're ready to approve something. So I think their thinking is if we build in some of those complete application requirements at the front end, put more of the onus on the applicant to ensure that there's a complete application submission right from the get-go, then there's be less back and forth. And therefore they're thinking that municipalities will be able to meet those timeframes. We think that there's still going to be challenges. There's still going to be times where that's not going to be the case. I think with that, I think municipalities are going to have to hopefully utilize that deeming of application complete and be really stringent on not receiving an application if it doesn't meet all the requirements that municipality is looking for, because that's when the clock starts ticking. And if if you don't, if you don't have everything, then you don't start the clock. If you have everything, then hopefully then the process should be fairly straightforward and should be able to meet those timeframes. But we still think there's going to be times where it's going to be challenging to meet those timeframes, especially if your municipality is relying on comments from other stakeholders. And with that, we feel that it's unfair to penalize municipalities on refunding those application fees. As I mentioned, municipalities rely on those fees to administer those programs. So then we're going to have to fund those refunds through other sources of funding, and that's likely to come from existing taxpayers. So that's where we don't see the connection ultimately of that particular change. I think they're trying to, at the end of the day, expedite approvals, get shovels in the ground quicker. We don't think this is one of the solutions, though, that we think that's just unfairly penalized municipalities. We'd rather spend more time on the official plan and zoning bylaws to make sure that those are up to date and ready to go. So then we're able to expedite approvals as quick as we can. So we think there's better time spent on those documents than trying to refund fees and trying to, in some cases, like I said, refuse applications. That either kicks it to the OLT, which causes even further delays and time constraints and resource constraints on everyone's end, and or it forces the applicant to reapply. And we just think that's not what I think the province was intending, but that's potentially the outcome that we could see with respect to these changes. Sorry for that long-winded answer, but we're finding it difficult to see the connection. And we think that the outcome will actually be worse and not actually achieve what the province is hoping to achieve.
It's almost like they think the municipalities are holding back just because they can, almost.
Yeah, and that's not been our understanding, especially locally here. Municipal staff do a fantastic job of bringing these applications forward in a timely fashion, and in some cases it's they're waiting for some information that's beyond the control of local municipal staff. And so if we felt that at the end of the day it was in some cases like municipalities were the holdup, then maybe that I could see a connection, but we're not seeing that, at least locally here in Grey County.
Madam CEO, did you have something to add?
I did. And I think Randy's last sentence there is maybe a significant thing to it. This is attempting, I believe, to fix a problem that we maybe don't necessarily have in Grey County. I think from past experience of mine, their municipalities in some places felt really unduly criticized by the development community, who said, these guys have had this application since, forever. Well, meanwhile, when you actually went, well, we had a piece of paper for a long time, but that bear very little relationship to a complete application. So, which is it? And so I think there was some attempt there to really get a handle on what does it mean to have a complete application. But really what I wanted to say, and I'll just bang this drum again, is about pre-consult. We all need to have a really good pre-consult process so that that kind of clarity and transparency is available to people. And if you're having the same questions and the same troubles over and over again about what are we supposed to be doing about this, that, or the other aspect of a development, then is that a place where you need to be looking at your own policies and standards and ensure that whether it's community design standards or whatever, you've documented that and it's out there. This is the thing that council will stand behind, so that it's not just one more reason to go round and round and where people fight to get the thing that they want and other people are saying, well, that doesn't work here. So we can't say enough about how important it is to get good information into people's hands way before they ever even start to put a application together.
Have it in place before the clock starts ticking.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Thank you for that. Councillor Soever, you had a comment as well.
Yes, and certainly I had the opportunity to sit in on the webinar that the ministry provided on the 20th, I think it was last week, and we also made a deputation to the Standing Committee of the Legislative Assembly that was reading the, before the bill was finally taken to the House. We were quite a bit surprised because we made the presentation on the 11th, and on the 14th it was voted on and got royal assent. So it did go rather quickly. We did express some concerns in our presentation on mainly around the lack of having a inclusionary zoning in rural areas. That's, we don't really have the tools. And what we did point out was that although it's Bill 109 has made some positive changes in removing roadblocks, these apply to all builds, and in the Blue Mountains anyway, we had 400 builds. So houses are getting built, just no attainable ones. And so we suggested maybe looking at inclusionary zoning Ontario-wide, and also requiring local planning authorities to establish and implement minimum targets for the provision of housing, which is affordable to low and moderate income households. And that's actually, those words are straight out of the provincial policy statement. So it says we're supposed to do it, but it doesn't really give us any more tools than we have now. And then we also suggest that they set up an attainable housing quota system, which actually provides credits to those that build attainable housing. With regard to the webinar and the discussion on refunding fees, I think it's pretty clear that municipalities will need to have very firm policies about what constitutes a complete application. And, that may mean that a complete application is one that has received the comments of all, if you have a pre-consult. So you gotta really institute policies. The way we see it is your pre-consult defines what comments you need. And maybe your application isn't complete until those comments are in from the Conservation Authority, from MTO. And that was brought up at the webinar on the 20th is, what about the MTO? I mean, that's one of our slowest responses sometimes is, if there's a development along Highway 26, is trying to get comments out of the Ministry of Transportation. So, so until you have those comments, maybe from a commenting agency, if your policies say your application isn't complete, then the clock doesn't start ticking. And if you've got all the comments and you've got very stringent requirements on your, what is a complete application, then I don't think it's really a problem. I know some municipalities will have huge problems. I mean, in spite of the nice words from Randy that we don't have a problem in Grey County, we do have a lower tier municipality that doesn't have an official plan and has no permanent planning staff, and has just, according to the report, the staff report that we got on, transferring responsibilities for planning. Just recently, there's one municipality that said they only have a part-time planner half a day a week. So obviously it will be very hard for them to respond and create policies that are necessary to deal with this new legislation. So I think, most municipalities that have planning departments and are adequately staffed don't have a problem, but some have underinvested, and I think this is going to be a challenge for them. And I don't know what we can do to help them, but certainly with no permanent planning staff and no official plan and defined policies, somebody's going to come in with a pretty, well, I've seen applications that were deemed complete, and you go, why did we even accept it as complete? Because it's really, needs a lot more information before. But the important thing for councils, I guess, is the July 1st deadline, after which council cannot approve a site plan. So as much as planning staff might want to bump it to council, that won't be possible anymore. And so everybody needs to really look at their delegated authorities, and those delegated authorities do have to be in place by, I think it's July 1st. So it's, there's not a lot of time to, to run that through a committee of the whole and council and come up with a new delegated authority. Because although our staff have the right to approve it, it still comes to the mayor and the clerk for a signature. So I have asked that question. I said, well, by signing it, I'm binding the municipality, and that question was asked at the webinar as well. So do the delegated staff have the authority to bind the municipality to a site plan agreement? Because right now they prepare the agreement, they approve it, and they send it to the mayor and the clerk for signature.
Right.
But the signature is what binds it. So under this new legislation where it said council, it has to be delegated to staff, is that signature and the binding of the municipality also now no longer the responsibility of the mayor and the clerk, but of some, because the mayor is a member of council. So that is a question, and we're waiting for an answer on that, because, it seems like, if the council can't be the binding authority, then the mayor shouldn't be signing it, probably.
It could be described or made also with bylaws and different things that council pass, and that the binding authority is still the mayor and the clerk too, right?
But this legislation says that responsibility is entirely staff's.
Well, hopefully you'll get an answer back.
Yeah, and like Council Swever indicated, that question was posed at the webinar. I think the provincial staff indicated that they would circle back on that because the question was like, is it delegated to staff up to the initial approvals, which is still subject to conditions and subject to a site plan agreement, and therefore is it delegate also to staff to sign the site plan agreement, or can that also be signed by, like Council Swever indicated, the mayor and the clerk, which is typically the process that we see today. So I think the provincial staff are going to circle back on that. We haven't seen anything with respect to that, but as Council Swever indicated, there is a tight time frame to at least delegate, even if it's just the initial approval of conditional approval of a site plan, that has to be done prior to July 1st, 2022. Provincial staff indicated that the refund and the deeming of complete application requirements doesn't kick in until January 1st, 2023. So they indicated they pushed that to that time frame to give municipalities the opportunity to update their bylaws around deeming complete applications and whether or not official plans would also need to be updated in order to reflect policies in terms of what the requirements for deeming applications complete. And that's still quite a tight time frame, especially when we're in a municipal election year as well.
Almost like a housekeeping update on your plan or your official plans, because usually an official plan review takes more than 6 months or 8 months, right? So, okay, one example I know that was raised was, and I know they're trying to get more houses built in across the province, there's a deficit. But one example was, okay, if you're changing the density from a family or a single family home zoning to a high intensity, there's going to be a lot of pushback. And that can cause its delay even just on that part, because you're changing the whole neighborhood from single family dwellings to high density or whatever. And, sometimes like that, things like that just don't flow as fast as they find. And also the other example is, if you're doing your pre-consult and say there's a requirement for environmental assessment or a scoped environmental assessment, that takes time as well, and you almost want to have that done before you deem it complete, because sometimes, depending on what it is, can sometimes take months depending on what it is too, right? So yes. And you mentioned about the ability to have to hire more staff if you have to make the applications move quicker, and you say you're even having trouble to replace your staff, right? So yeah. Okay, any other questions up to this point? Okay, Randy, you want to go through those questions, summarize those questions that you have answered then, or?
For sure. So as I mentioned, there are some other associated housing consultations that the province has posted through the ERO. So they're seeking feedback on housing needs in rural and northern municipalities, opportunities to increase missing middle housing and gentle density, and seeking feedback on access to provincial financing for not-for-profit housing providers. So with that, there's some questions that the province posed through those postings, and we tried to just provide some initial comments, again, with the intent if the task force supports this motion, we would provide these comments and feedback back to the province. But around the housing needs in rural and northern municipalities, so first question is, what are the key barriers impacting municipalities of meeting housing needs that may be unique to northern rural communities? And we just noted what we've had the discussions already with this task force about the increasing land costs, the increasing development and building costs being a barrier, our overall just increasing housing prices, largely being dictated by market forces, increasing the demand for housing beyond what can actually be supplied by the current market. Not enough builders and licensed contractors to keep up with the demand. Housing being used for short-term accommodation, which impacts overall housing supply for residents, and not having the proper type and mix of residential units available to meet market and affordable needs. Example, we need more smaller and rental units for downsizing and or earlier entry into the housing market for first-time buyers and renters. The second question is, what kind of flexibility is needed to address housing needs in your municipality? And we just know that the more flexibility provided to municipalities to address our housing needs, the better. And therefore, provincial policies and programs that allows just more flexibility for municipalities to make decisions that respond to the needs of our community is where we would like to be at. This could include policies that allow municipalities the flexibility to deal with settlement area boundary expansions to increase the supply of land, for employment land conversions, and things of that nature. We also noted that financial programs from the province to create transitional housing and supportive housing and not-for-profit housing is key. And we just noted that the social services relief funds have been very helpful with that. And staff recommend that at minimum that a similar funding program be provided by the province to help support the creation of more community housing, just to ensure that we're providing housing supports for those most in need of our communities, which I know has been front and center in the focus of this particular task force. We also noted that focusing community consultation requirements during the creation or updating of official plans and zoning bylaws is key, but once those documents are in place, consider reducing consultation requirements for things like site plan and plan of subdivision applications, as long as they conform to those official plan policies and zoning bylaw documents. So that way it helps maybe expedite the process. If we front end our community consultations, which are important documents at the official plan and zoning stages. But like I said, once those are in place, maybe we reduce the consultation requirements for those more technical applications that are just administering and implementing essentially those documents. In terms of question 3, what potential tools or policies could the government consider to address housing needs in municipalities? We noted incentives, so funding from the province again to assist with incentives to target specific housing required in our municipalities. Doing more building code updates to allow for more housing types, including modular housing and tiny housing. Looking at community improvement plans and allowing these to be created by upper tier municipalities without the current restrictions that are in place. Council Soever indicated this tool as well in terms of allowing municipalities to implement inclusionary zoning provisions without the current restrictions that are imposed. This would allow municipalities to set a specified percentage of housing to be at an affordable housing rate for all new developments. Or the developer could provide a contribution in lieu of the affordable housing that can then be used to build more community housing and not-for-profit housing. So we think that's a key tool that we would like the province to reduce the current restrictions to allow rural municipalities to put in place. We also noted that any provincial owned lands that are surplus the needs of the province, that they consider transferring these to municipalities so that it can be used to create community housing, or that it could be sold to create funds to support the creation of community housing. We also suggested regulating short-term accommodations province-wide, as well as looking at additional funding for planning and development review staff. This just goes back to the earlier comments in terms of municipalities may require to the need to upstaff in order to process these applications within the new prescribed timeframes. So having additional funds to support that would be beneficial. In terms of question 4, do you have other suggestions for ways to improve housing supply and needs in rural municipalities? So we just noted, again, funding, updates to building code, those programs and tools that we just talked about. But we also highlighted establishing a guaranteed basic income living wage province-wide so that everyone has sufficient funds to secure and maintain housing. I know this has come up in many discussions in the past with this task force, as well as head of our own sound task force and the mental health addictions task force. So that's something we wanted to highlight. As well as additional funding and supports for post-secondary institutions in terms of training skilled trades locally to support the labor force we need to actually build this housing. So those were just some of the things that we identified in that particular consultation that, again, we tried to summarize all the comments we've heard from the various task force, including this task force, based on all the discussions that have occurred to date. And we wanted to just highlight to the province what we think could help in terms of supporting some further housing creation in rural areas.
I wonder, Randy, if you should toot our own horn that we have put 1% of our budget toward affordable housing. Maybe that could be, I just wondered if that should be written in here, just in the sense that that's something that we did here in Grey County, and could that be, commented throughout the province as well?
Yeah, thanks for that, Chair McQueen. And we did highlight that in the next consultation questions around the opportunities to increase missing middle housing, gentle density, and supports. We did note that the county's housing action plan that this task force has created, and we noted the Affordable Housing Fund and some other tools that have been, or policies and programs that we're moving forward with. So I think that's something that we just suggested or recommended that the province could look at province-wide to be able to, again, help encourage more affordable and attainable housing throughout the province. So we did try to highlight that. We didn't highlight that in the first discussion, but we definitely could have for sure. But we tried to highlight it at least in the next consultation summary.
I know I share it with colleagues that I talk to throughout the province, and just to say, well, sometimes you got to be a player at the table as well as we are. Just before we go any further, Randy, Councillor Keaveney has a question. Go ahead.
Thanks very much, Chair McQueen. Randy, thank you for all of that information. One question in relation to key barriers. And I noticed that we didn't bring up NIMBYism, and I wonder if there's a potential to talk about that as we address barriers and thinking of education to our residents to help them understand really what affordable housing is and why we need it, and try to put more of a positive spin on that issue, because certainly in our municipality that is something we hear a lot about.
For sure. Thank you for that question. And again, we didn't highlight it in the first questions, but we did highlight it in question 1 for the next consultation. We highlighted that one of the biggest barriers for delaying the diversity and type of housing being built in our existing neighborhoods is NIMBYism, for sure. And I agree that more education, more awareness, not just locally through a Grey County, but if that can be extended province-wide, would be very helpful. Just to let people know that we need this housing. We need this type of housing in our communities in order to support our residents. And so I think it's a great point, and it's something that I can't recall if we flagged the education side of things. So if we didn't, we'd be happy to add those comments in before we send the comments off to the province.
Somewhere there was a motion being passed around through the province, and I think at one time it was up to 25 municipalities that were supporting a complete change with the appeal process, like to almost eliminate it sort of thing. If council makes a decision, then that's what sticks. I don't know if you've heard much about that, Randy, or not.
Yeah, there was some discussion. I think some municipalities were suggesting that, and I think it just goes back to the comments in terms of, you know, we think the key documents for community consultation and setting that vision of the community is at the official plan and zoning bylaw stages. And once those plans are updated and in place, then the technical exercise, that's where we see either reduction in consultation timeframes or reduction in potential appeals mechanisms could be considered, because then that's essentially just moving forward and implementing what the community's vision has been put in place at the OP and zoning stage. So that's, it sounds similar to, I think, what we've identified, but maybe taking it to even the next step in terms of not just even reducing consultation requirements, but could you reduce appeal mechanisms as well when we get to those technical applications?
So maybe the streamline of that is right away identify, it's just meet the official plan, then it's gone. Like it just, right. There needs to be a fast approach to eliminate those appeals. Because we know when we have those public meetings, people they don't want it because they don't want it, but they don't realize the process, right? So,
yeah.
Okay, carry on, Randy.
So the next area of consultation, as I mentioned, was around increasing missing middle housing, gentle density, increasing supports for multi-generational housing. So the first question was, what are the biggest barriers and delays to diversifying the types of housing? And as we discussed, NIMBYism, appeals to OLT, dated official plans and zoning bylaws, and we just noted due to staff resource challenges just caused by increasing application volumes and development inquiries. The significant upfront investment that's required for rental apartments before you actually see a return on that investment, as well as the length of time for provincial approvals for things such as record of site conditions, MTO approvals, and EAs, which was noted earlier as well. In terms of the second question, what further changes the planning and development process would you suggest to make it easier to support gentle density and missing middle and multi-gen housing? So this is where we did note that Grey County, in partnership with our member municipalities, are taking actions through the county's housing action plan to try to address some of the housing challenges within our communities. And we just noted, you know, the CIP program that we've collectively implemented, offering development charge exemptions for purpose-built rental housing, exploring the use of county and municipal-owned surplus lands to support future builds, establishing that affordable housing fund, just to name a few, and as well as ensuring our OPs and zoning bylaws are updated, are all key to making sure that we can expedite and allow for, you know, this opportunities to create that missing middle housing and multi-gen housing and increase our density in our communities that can support it. The province should also consider limiting appeals of zoning amendments. So I couldn't recall if we flagged that, but I guess we did, that are associated with implementing a proposed draft approved plan of subdivision. So recognizing again, just opportunities to expedite the process where we're just going through, like I said, a technical exercise.
Randy, just before you go forward,
yeah,
I know our one of our planners in our municipality created a document to talk about the process and appeals and planning. And I wonder if it's something that if we have it on our website, so when people get through the process, they have to realize that if you're appealing certain things, you have to have some really good reasons why. And because like I said, our planner brought this report to our council, and it really was a good report because it takes away the whole part of just saying, no, I don't support this, because you don't have the grounds to do that. Just food for thought, but
yeah,
just something that a lot of people don't realize that they don't get involved until it's something that affects them as a neighbor or that type of thing, right? So
great,
just food for thought.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that for sure.
Councillor Keaveney, did you have a quick question?
Quick question. Yes, Chair, thank you. Randy, can you define for me and perhaps put some numbers to gentle density? Just kind of pull that in for me.
Yeah, and that's going to vary by each neighborhood, each community, in terms of what density can be supported. So gentle density, I think, is intended to be increasing density that's still compatible with the existing neighborhood or the community. So what we've seen in some cases is where we have, say, existing communities where there's a lot of single detached homes. Can we add adjacent to those, like say semi-detached townhouses, and then gradually increasing up to maybe apartment style or multi-unit residential homes, so that you're not putting necessarily a 6-story apartment building right beside some single attached homes. So I think that's what the term that they're describing in terms of gentle density and increasing that density to be still compatible with those existing neighborhoods. At least that's how I've interpreted that term or that meaning in the past, if that makes sense. So it varies by each community in terms of what that density could look like, and it varies by each community and by each neighborhood for that matter. So in terms of the third question that was posed there, so that are you aware of innovative approaches to land use planning and community building? So again, we just referenced the Grey County Housing Action Plan that this task force has created. And then question 4, are there any other changes? And we just noted, just see previous responses, which include the responses to the previous consultation questions as well. And then in terms of the last one, this is provincial financing for not-for-profit housing providers. So the first question was, could easier or less costly access to lending increase the supply for not-for-profit housing? We just noted that yes, that could, but access to provincial surplus land or provincial grants to support not-for-profit housing would be more beneficial. And then question 2, what are the key barriers and gaps? We just noted, similar to other housing barriers, cost of land, cost of construction, the lack of skilled labor and workforce just to keep up with demand. Question 3, do the issues around access to financing differ for not-for-profits? Are they different for private source of financing? So again, we just highlighted for rentals, there's a lot of upfront financing required before they start seeing returns on that investment. And for not-for-profits, it's just making sure that they're able to maintain that housing going forward, and being able to see that in some cases they have to upfront those costs. So anything we can do to help reduce those upfront costs for not-for-profits as well as private developers through things like tax increment equivalent grants, DC exemptions, application fee exemptions for not-for-profits, or no low interest rate loans until construction is completed. Those are just some examples we identified as what could be looked at or explored further for not-for-profit builds. What role could government play in addressing those barriers? So we just again noted our housing action plan and the CIP program that's been put in place by this task force and county council, and working with our member municipalities, of course. Recommending the province consider similar programs throughout the province, allowing, again, upper tier municipalities and lower tier municipalities to establish a CIP, and providing access to provincial surplus lands. And then question 5, how could government prioritize its financial assistance for not-for-profit housing providers? So we just noted a housing first policy approach. Again, any surplus provincial lands being offered first to municipalities or for not-for-profit housing. Providing interest-free loans and grants to create more community housing, ensuring that provincial policies and approvals are not the barrier to the creation of housing, expediting any required provincial approvals, and ensuring that there are sufficient provincial staff funding and resources to review and approve matters associated with community housing and not-for-profit developments. So that's just a summary of what we highlighted and outlined in those consultations. And yeah, I don't know if there's any further questions, but in the end, what staff are recommending is that this task force support the report and the comments provided, and then send this to the province for their consideration.
And I know from us, if we pass this today, you're allowed to expedite that because it has to be in by a certain time, right? To the planning.
Yeah, they're asking for consultation comments by the end of this week. So that's why we asked that for that clause to be included. And we've already sent a copy of the report to local municipal planning staff so that they had this copy of this report. We also had the discussion. We had a local planners meeting on April 6th, and we started discussing some of these things, thinking that we had, again, more time to comment on the Bill 109 changes. And so we did get some feedback already from local municipal staff, which was greatly appreciated.
Well, thanks, Randy, for all the hard work you did. There's a lot of information in there, and I know you eat and sleep this stuff, so that's fantastic, and it comes across very clearly. Any questions on this report? It was moved by Mr. Ward and second by Councillor Keaveney. If there's no other comments, questions, all in favor? It's carried unanimously. Okay, well, thanks again, Randy, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
And moving on, then we have a piece of correspondence that came from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. That sort of addressed, I guess, basically everybody across the, I guess, head of council and chairs of district social services administrative boards. So, Emery, I don't know if you wanted to speak to it at all, or go ahead.
Certainly.
Oh, do we need Madam Clerk, do we need a motion for this correspondence?
Yes, please.
Okay, can I have somebody move and second that, please? Councillor O'Leary, second by Councillor Soever. Thank you. Go ahead, Anne Marie. Sorry about that.
No problem. This is just to make you aware that there are some regulatory changes coming through the community housing renewal strategy. The largest one is that our agreements that we have with our nonprofit providers right across the province. We have 9 nonprofit providers in Grey County. There are over 700 across the province that all provide a mix of market and rent geared to income housing. And these agreements that we have are all coming to an end. So the province is looking at providing us some guidelines and some legislation and regulatory framework as to what's next. So how can we continue to entice these nonprofits to stay with us and continue to provide funding? And what does that funding look like? As their mortgages come to an end, there will be a change in the amount of funding that's required. But at the same time, the province has put in a framework that will be providing additional funding for capital repairs and entering into a financial plan that is jointly agreed upon and developed with the service manager, ourselves, and the 9 nonprofits. Our first nonprofit agreement to end is in 2023. I believe it's in January, February. So we'll be working towards that. There's more information coming on that. We are working with our sector organization, OMSA, and the province in looking at some sort of framework for an agreement. The other regulatory amendments are on on income limits and assets. And we in Grey County already have those. A number of providers don't. And this is just giving us a deadline in which to have a income limit and asset limits. By having the limits, it does ensure that we're providing housing for those that truly need it. And the county of Grey has done this for a while. So there will be a report coming in June to provide further information and get any approvals that we may need from council.
Okay, thank you for that. Any comments from committee members? At least this signature you can read. Some signatures you cannot read. Okay, seeing there's no other comments, all in favor of that correspondence? That's carried unanimously. Okay, thank you. Anything else for today's meeting? I don't see anything else on the agenda. I did hear a stat this morning. I'm not sure how true it is on the news that 30% of houses in Ontario are second units of some sort. They're not primary units. So I don't know if anybody heard that today, but I caught something that on the news this morning. So interesting, but mind you, I don't know if that's including people that have homes that they rent out or for rental or whatever. I guess, I didn't get the whole details, but maybe keep your ears open for that. There may be more information coming that way. All right, so our next meeting is set for June, so that could be,
Sorry, Mr. Chair. There is other business bi-monthly meetings
okay,
or
there are.
reports to the task force. So Anne Marie?
Sorry.
Thank you. I just put this item on as we're getting further into our construction phase of our build, just wanting to put it out there to council or to this task force if they would like by every other month reports on our progress, you know, how we're doing, where we're at in the process, just as some oversight. I know that it would be great to have some of that feedback from council and the task force, and for us to be able to provide you as where we are. So just thinking that every other month might be where we're at. It might be longer stretches depending on where we're at within our phases, but just wanting this to be to keep you informed of where we're at with this build.
No. Any questions about that? Concerns? No, that sounds okay. Sorry about that, Madam Clerk. I missed that. It was in small writing. So yeah, okay. So you don't need just a nod of the head is okay. Okay, fine. That's good. So our next meeting is June 24th, and we'll have some updated reports on that, or updates on what's happening. So you may be building by then. All right. So seeing there's no other one, I don't know, Madam Clerk, on these, do you need an adjournment or do you need a motion to adjourn?
You need a motion to adjourn, sir.
Okay. So can I have a motion to adjourn, please? Moved by Warden Heck, second by Councillor Soever, that we adjourn at 2:26. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay, that's carried unanimous. Have a great day, everyone. It looks like it stopped snowing, so that's a good thing. So